Well, thank you, everyone, for being on the call. And sorry I couldn't spend time with each of you individually or with our television partners. We just have a lot of moving parts and a lot of things going on. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you for your patience. Obviously, this is uncharted territory for us as an institution, let alone as an athletic department. And, of course, it's a Big Ten Conference and an NCAA association. First and foremost, I want to make sure everyone understands that all the measures that are being implemented is to hopefully prevent a significant community burden on our healthcare system. Typically, we always think of the disease as it relates to an individual, and what we need to do is think of it from a community perspective. This is a unique case. All of our efforts are to try and to decrease the overall community burden, and we needed to focus on that at all levels. So all the measures that we've implemented in different levels, Big Ten, NCAA, institutionally, are focused on that, trying to ensure that we take care of everyone that we're responsible for, but also not overwhelm our healthcare resources. So I wanted to share that with you and kind of put it in perspective. We're blessed to have had unbelievable athletic events. It was a great season going for many of our sports and many of our individual student athletes. And while it's disheartening and extremely painful to abruptly end their seasons, we feel that the things that we've done are for the better overall health of our communities and individuals involved in those communities. So just wanted to share that from so you have a perspective of how we looked at it. Then I'll be glad to take any questions from here.
All righty, we'll go ahead and open up the conference with questions. We'll open it up. First question's coming from Doug Lesmerises from the Cleveland.com. On deck will be Adam Jardy. Doug, floor is yours.
Thanks. Gene, can you maybe just take us through the process a little bit of you and the decision makers in the athletic department and the way you were talking with the NCAA? When did you really start thinking about matters, and how did you eventually come to some of the conclusions that you came to as an athletic department?
Yeah, it was really a pretty complicated process, to be quite honest. It was Big Ten conversations, NCAA conversations, institutional conversations, and departmental conversations, all occurring in a parallel fashion. Frankly, I was in Big Ten meetings on Tuesday, I think. I forgot what, Tuesday, I think. And was it Tuesday? Wednesday? So I was in Big Ten meetings, and we were decisions that we needed to make that ultimately were announced. But my team was here in Columbus having meetings, and I was periodically on the conference call with them. And so our internal team in the athletic department and the unit called Business Advancement, which oversees, the Fawcett and Blackwell and other rental units, we had about 15 meetings within a week. The institution has had multiple meetings, and then the Big Ten has had multiple phone calls. So I can't say, Doug, in a sequential way, how the decisions were made. I can only share that there was an unbelievable amount of communication in a short period of time to make the decisions that were made. I was driving home from Indianapolis on 3 different conference calls and talking with multiple individuals in between. So I wish I could give you a better sequential process, but it really didn't happen that way. It was kind of staggered.
Gene, it's Heather Dennett at ESPN.
Heather, I'll call on you. Just hold on. Go ahead, Doug.
Okay.
Gene, to follow up, I know this is not the first priority, but I know you guys are always planning ahead. Have you had discussions yet about any kind of expected financial impact on the athletic department, or is that for another day?
Yeah, we as we've gone along, we've recognized that cancellations of events And keep in mind, most people tend to forget that we have significant rental income with our facilities, and so we've had a lot of cancellation of events outside of athletic events that will have a financial impact. We're aware of those, but we haven't quantified that. And at some point in time, we'll do that. What we decided early on was, and this is consistent with the institution and the President's Cabinet, first and foremost, our values, and our values did not include that as an important item.
Okay, we'll move on to Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch with Austin Ward from Lettermen Row on deck. Adam?
Thank you. Gene, you're talking about all the different conversations you've been having. Wednesday night going into Thursday, what sort of conversations were you having with the Big Ten and with the NCAA about the men's basketball tournaments and whether they would continue? What were those, like, maybe 24 hours or so like?
I decided individually that I felt that we needed to cancel the tournament and we needed to cancel the NCAA tournament. I had decided that that was my position. And so I began to have conversation with my colleagues in the Big Ten, and we ultimately ended up on a conference call. I can't remember what day it was, but we ended up on a conference call. And then we also began to have conversations with our presidents to try and get the Big Ten to a point to cancel the tournament. And once we did that, we kind of shifted our focus to the NCAA. The NCAA was having strategy sessions along that path of the same time that we were having discussions in the Big Ten and every other conference across the country. And so I, along with my colleagues, were trying to drive the Big Ten, and I have to compliment Kevin Warren because he really took the leadership role to bring our presidents together to ultimately make that decision, and he communicated with the rest of the districts across the country because they were having similar conversations, and I think you all saw that it became, in a short window of time, everyone made their cancellations. So it really was a short window of time.
And when it comes specifically to the NCAA tournament, were there any conversations, or were you part of any conversations that would have said, hey, maybe let's postpone this, let's try to decide something in 30 days instead of just out canceling it?
No, I was not a part of that. I just, that was the Board of Governors of the NCAA and the NCAA staff. I was just a single member voicing my opinion. They had to consider all the other ramifications, but so I was just one of the 371 Division I members that expressed my own individual position.
Next up is Austin Ward from Lettermen Row with Tony Girdman on deck.
Thanks, Jerry. Gene, I'm just curious if you've had in the last couple of days any opportunities to talk directly with the student athletes who either lost the rest of that winter season or lost all of the spring, and any conversations about what they've been going through and what they've expressed to you about what happened there?
No, I haven't had any face-to-face conversations with any athletes. A few text messages, a couple emails, primarily from athletes who are hopeful that they have an opportunity to get a fifth year, and so we'll move down that path as we get to it.
And from your perspective, when you look at those years and trying to get that back, there's all these numbers with scholarship limitations, and I know it's very early. What would be your perspective on how you proceed with that for Ohio State? You might be a school that's better positioned to account for that financially, but what all would be hurdles to giving them all that extra year of eligibility?
Yeah, that's a good point, Austin. I think the NCAA coordinating council has already started working on that, and they understand that this is something that we should try and do. But as you alluded to, there's a number of different issues that need to be worked out, taking into consideration the diversity of our membership. But bottom line, we need to do what's right for the student athlete. So looking at financial aid, roster sizes, all those type of things, time of year. Your spring sports is not a 2-semester sport, it's a 1-semester sport. What does that mean? some their sports, some of them were a third into their season, halfway through their season. What does that mean? Financial impact on the institutions, scholarship exemptions, even your freshmen who redshirted. What does that mean to them? So there's a number of different things that have to be considered. We have not talked about that as a team. That's just off the head. But I'm glad that the NCAA coordination committee from the council, Division I council, is taking this on to try and get ahead of it, because student athletes need to know one way or the other, and then coaches need to be a part of that process so that they can ultimately plan relative to recruiting and roster management.
All right, next up is Tony Girdman from the Ozone with Heather Dinich on deck. Tony?
Hey, Gene, thanks for doing this. Are you operating with the possibility that there would be no football season this year?
No, I haven't thought that far, Tony. I appreciate that thought, but I haven't thought that far. We're dealing with today. We're dealing with what trying to make sure we adhere to the institutional policies and requests. Keep in mind, so I assume some of you are paying attention to what the university is doing. We have a number of student athletes in the dorms. The university has asked that all students in the dorms be out by March 22nd. So we have a number of students who have to move out, and some were just returning from trips. So we have international students who are trying to move out and go back home. And so we have issues on the ground floor today that we're trying to deal with. We've had 2 conference calls with all of our head coaches. We'll have another one next Monday, trying to help them as they deal with the issues. And so we just got a million other things that we're thinking about. Appreciate the question, though, Tony.
Yeah, and then as a leader, how frustrating is it when you can only be so far ahead and you're thinking, days right now?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's as much frustrating as it is just wearing on you. It's the exhaustion and the amount of due diligence you have to take relative to every single iteration of this change. There's just so many different levels that you have to think about for how it impacts students and student athletes. And so it's frustrating that we're here. It's disheartening. I think there's 13 confirmed cases in the state of Ohio, and that's grown significantly in less than 5 days. And so you want to do everything that you can to get your student athletes and the students out of harm's way, and you want to do it expeditiously. And so I wouldn't say it's frustrating as much as it is, it just requires focus and time and effort.
Okay, next up, Heather Dinich from ESPN. And on deck will be Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove Rivals.
Gene, you touched on this a little bit, but can you go into more detail about what the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday were like for you personally, as far as juggling, managing, phone calls, talking to people, just the whole whirlwind of it?
Yeah, so Wednesday, we were in Big Ten meetings. I went over Wednesday to Indianapolis. We had Big Ten meetings that started at 1 o'clock. We had athletic directors in there, faculty reps, senior women administrators. And our original intent was to have an agenda focused primarily on NIL, but this took our entire time, and we ultimately ended up making some recommendations to Commissioner Warren. I think that evening he had the conference call with the presidents. And so, we really spent, I think it was maybe 3.5 hours really honing in on a decision to do what we did with the tournament. So it was a great deal of discussion about what was right for our student athletes, and then what was right for our fans in the stands, what was right for the ushers and the ticket takers and all the people involved. When you listen to all the experts across this country talk about groups and gatherings and the transmission of how this disease occurs, we're encouraging group interaction. So then, we just time to make the call.
I've talked to a couple other athletic directors throughout the country who express frustration with the NCAA's timing of the announcement about the spring sports as well. Guys are saying to me, look, I couldn't talk to my softball coach. I couldn't talk to my baseball coach or track. There was no time for face-to-face reaction. We all learned about this on social media and Twitter like everybody else. How did you find out, and were you at all frustrated with the NCAA's announcement on that end?
No, I'm fortunate, Heather. As are my colleagues in the Big Ten. We are very collegial. I was driving over, coming back, and I was on a group text deal with all of the other ADs. And so, the reality is, I was not surprised. I knew that the NCAA was having strategy sessions. I know how hard this is to make that decision. So I was just hoping that they would come to the decision. So I wasn't frustrated at all. I just knew that they would come to whatever decision they came to, you deal with. But I was hopeful that they would come out where they were. So what was more important in that timing was the conference decisions. The NCAA decisions, the tournament didn't start till next week. So reality is everyone should, in my view, have been focused on what they could control. What they could control was their individual conference and their individual institutions. And so allow the NCAA to do what they did. They ultimately made a decision, and that was 4 days or 5 days before the tournament even started. So I was fine with the process.
Thank you.
Next up, Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove Rivals, and on deck will be Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Gene. You talked about the conference. Kevin Warren's only been on the job for a couple of months, taking over for Jim Delaney, and obviously an unprecedented situation. What have the conference discussions been like, and how has Kevin Warren been able to step into this role? And the Big Ten really seems to have been taking the lead in terms of conferences, in terms of making decisive and absolute decisions.
I love Kevin, and he has really a good perspective on student athlete welfare. Obviously, he was a student athlete himself. He has a son who's playing at the Division I level, and so he is very student athlete centric, which I think you all know is one of my focuses. And so, but he also has a law degree, so he has that ability to think in that linear way that is so helpful. So he's guided us through our discussions, kept us focused, allowed us to vet different parts of the issues the right way within the appropriate amount of time, and then he, shift us in another direction. And to me, it was excellent how he moved us along to help us get to a consensus in a decision. So he's done a great job. I feel really fortunate that he's our leader.
Thanks, Gene. No follow-up.
Okay. Next up, Joey Kaufman from the Dispatch with Dan Hope from 11 Warriors on deck. Joey?
Gene, thanks for doing this. Question on spring football practice. You guys made the decision to postpone that until April 6th or possibly later. Why the decision to postpone it rather than, cancel it like other sports? And are you guys keeping that possibility open still? How seriously, I guess?
So the Big Ten made a decision that all organized team activities be canceled suspended until April 6th. Personally, I was of the opinion, just like a few other colleagues, that it should have been eliminated until the end of the term. but that decision was made to suspend, and I support that. And so we will see how this rolls, and somewhere along the line we'll have to make a decision that after that there'll be no more organized team activities, or there will be. So we'll just see how that goes. For us, I haven't even looked at the math. We had our spring game that was scheduled on the 11th, so I guess technically we'd probably be able to get in like 5 or 6 practices. I have no clue. I haven't thought about it that hard. But the decision was to allow for us to kind of evaluate it as things go on.
Gotcha. And then just as a follow-up, or another question. Obviously, with all the spring sports, you would have a lot of games on campuses. You would have people who work those events, vendors, I guess people who scan tickets, employees, people who work at those jobs. Is there any compensation plan for employees who work those events?
Yeah, we have not. Great question. That's on our agenda. We'll continue to talk about that relative to our full-time staff and part-time that are working on a kind of daily basis. They have jobs to do still. We're working with them to actually shift their thinking around type of things they typically would have done in the summertime. Now they can do now. We're actually encouraging some people to take vacation now. Let's keep in mind our students aren't here. They're learning virtually. So we're working through that right now, and we have not finalized what we'll do with part-time and student employees and things of that nature. We still have working that through.
All right, next up will be Dan Hope from 11 Warriors with Bruce Hooley on deck. Dan?
Hi, Gene. Obviously, you guys have a lot of different things in place for student athletes, whether that be medical care, mental health care, academic advisors. With the students, moving off campus and doing all their stuff remotely, do you have protocols in place to allow student athletes to still receive those resources remotely?
Yes. So our Student Athlete Support Services organization has been working with the Office of Academic Affairs, and we're taking advantage of the technology, but still each sport has an academic advisor. They're aware of every student athlete situation. Our coaches on a weekly basis will continue to work with their academic advisor, go through their rosters and track the performance of each of our student athletes relative to what they do academically. So our structure doesn't really change. Support services don't change. It's just our motivational techniques might change because they're not here to make sure they're doing their work. But all the services are there and feel really good about that.
Obviously, for the football team specifically, there's a lot of unprecedented challenges here. And for Ryan Day, just going into his second year as a head coach, he's now going to deal with potentially not having spring practices and not being able to recruit normally over the next couple of months. How are you advising him in terms of kind of helping him through dealing with some of these different challenges?
Unfortunately, Ryan's extremely talented, and he's got an experienced staff that they'll brainstorm together. But Diana Sable and I have been in communications with him constantly, and this is still fluid. So we'll ultimately sit down with him individually and talk about strategies. We haven't done that yet, but the reality, I feel comfortable that I was really glad that the NCAA came out and put in place a national dead period because we were out by ourselves, so they put in a national dead period. So from a competitive equity point of view, that was important. But we'll figure out what we need to do as we move forward.
Thanks, Gene.
All right, next up is Bruce Hooley from Sports Illustrated Maven with Bill Rabinowitz from the Dispatch on deck. Bruce?
Gene, you referred to the work of the NCAA Coordinating Council looking at the possibility of an extra year of eligibility. Do you have a personal position, or is it Ohio State's institutional position? Are you in support of that for spring sport athletes or for spring sport and winter sport athletes?
Yeah, I am definitely, Bruce, great question. I'm definitely in support of an extra year or semester of eligibility for our spring sport athletes. We haven't delved into the details around that, so I'm kind of wavering on the whole academic year versus a spring sport. One of the other elements is, some of those student athletes are really already graduated. So, what do they do academically? So we'll have to figure that out. But then the other piece is relative to the winter sports. I haven't looked at the winter sports. My assumption is, just off the top of my head, I would be supportive of that as well, as I mentally go through these sports. So that's an exercise I got to do, Bruce. Thank you. That's something I just haven't done. I got to go through that. But I would probably think that winter sports, I'd feel the same way.
And to follow up on a different topic, just curious, have you had any athletes, coaches, or support personnel who have tested negatively for the virus, or do you have with your medical personnel the capacity to test those who think they may be symptomatic?
We have not, and our university, anyone that would have a challenge would go through our institutional medical center, so it wouldn't be just with our trainers or doctors locally. It would be institutional, Bruce. But no, we have not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Bill Rabinowitz from the Columbus Dispatch with Ari Wasserman on deck. Bill?
Yes, Gene. It sounds like you came to the conclusion earlier than many that the tournament and all sports had to be canceled. When did you first think, oh, man, this could be as big as it turned out to be?
It's interesting. That's a great question. I was fortunate. I'm on the president's cabinet here at The Ohio State University, and so I'm in on the conversations around the details around the impact of this disease. And I was a part of conversations that led our institution to put in place the things that were being put in place. So I had an understanding of the impact of understanding of mortality rates. I had understanding of the profile of the people who were being infected and the outcomes. So I may have come at it in a different place than many of my colleagues. So I was ready Monday, and the reality is I've just seen so much and understood that if you look at any pandemic, any situation like this in our past, if you look at what had happened in China and other countries, we needed to put in measures to mitigate the growth of the virus. And if we continued behaviors, the people in the groupings that we were putting them in, it would only continue to provide the virus an opportunity to spread. And so it's just common sense to me that we needed to do something sooner rather than later. As you know, the shared governance process, you have to be patient and hope that leadership ultimately makes the right decisions, and they did, in my view.
And as much as you love sports, was it hard to kind of come to that conclusion and realize all these 1,000 athletes that you have and all these people that were going to be denied their chance for their dream? That's just a consequence of the bigger picture. How hard was that kind of to wrestle?
That's hard. That's the knot. That's the gut. That's the thing that's the hardest part of all this. And that's where you get yourself trapped constantly in that process of making that decision. And even into Wednesday and Thursday into the conversations, you still go back to that because, you have the faces. I have Andre Wesson's face. I know what he's gone through. But yes, I have Al Selig's face in tennis. I have all that. And so you're going through the process, having these conversations, and those faces pop up constantly. And so but you got to think about what's right in our society, what's right for the people that we serve. And, we got to think beyond that. So that was really hard. That was the hardest part of this whole deal. knowing many of the athletes like I do.
All right, folks, we have about five. Yep, we've got about 5 more minutes. I'm going to get to everybody here. Next up, Ari Wasserman from The Athletic with Nathan Baird on deck. Ari?
Hey, Gene. Thanks for taking some time for us. Was just wondering, without spring practice or the cancellation or postponement of it, how does that impact, in your mind, the team's preparation going into the fall? Does that extend any practice time or anything that occurs in the fall, or does that change anything about, in your mind, what Ohio State and other colleges might need to prepare for the season in terms of schedule later on?
I haven't thought about that a whole lot, Ari, but obviously it will impact us. Everyone's not taking the position that we took. Some have across the country. Some may still across the country. This disease is involved. So I haven't really been thinking about the competitive balance or equity. We will have to come up with a strategy, particularly when we're allowed to have team activities in the strength and conditioning space to make sure that we help our young men get back to where they were. Fortunately, we do have very mature players. They know how to work out on their own. They know the proper training techniques based
my admission
program.
Hey, could you mute your phone, please?
We've issued a requirement for suspending all.
So I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to get our guys back up on track and be competitive in the fall.
Hey, and one other question, Gene. When you said earlier that you had a conference call with your coaches about how to handle this or what's next, could you just provide a little context of what that conference call might have been like, and just for football fans in general, what might Ryan Day's schedule be like right now with practice and recruiting suspended? How in terms of just advice you might have given him on how to approach his day to day.
Yeah, I don't know what his day-to-day schedule will be like. I do know that he will continue to communicate with his coaches. They'll continue to communicate with the student athletes, probably knowing them on a daily basis to make sure that they're all right and communicating with them. Our conference calls have been primarily around organizational issues, how to handle dorm issues, how to handle financial aid issues, those type of things. I think Ryan and his staff, like all of our coaches, will spend a great deal of time talking to our student athletes digitally, trying to they stay on track.
All right, next up will be Nathan Baird from Cleveland.com with Tim May on deck. Nathan?
Yeah, Gene, just a follow-up on the competitive equity issue, I guess a follow-up on what Joey asked earlier. You said it was your belief that the Big Ten should have just canceled all through the spring. If they choose not to extend that moratorium on spring practices through April 6th, does Ohio State or yourself have the opportunity or the ability to just have its own policy and continue to cancel practices, or do you feel, from a competitive equity standpoint, I guess partially beholden to go with whatever the Big Ten decides?
Yeah, we would have the capacity to put in place our own policy. In fact, prior to the conference making its decision, my teammates and I were working on a strategy that may have calls for us to have our own policies in place. And I was, as an institution, we were not the only ones in our league that were moving down that path. There were other schools in this league that were considering having different policies. So I'm glad that we all came together and had a unified front on this. So, but if we are able to have organized practice after April 6th, we'll come up with strategy and we'll have them.
Have you anything been communicated to student athletes as far as, obviously they can work out individually by themselves at home as anybody can. Anything that's been communicated to them as far as working out in groups on their own, small groups? I mean, completely up to their discretion, but has anything been communicated along those lines?
No, that's really up to their discretion. We just can't organize it, and we won't be organizing and hosting in our facilities. Yes, they'll probably end up doing that, knowing them.
All right, next up will be Tim May from Lettermen Row, and our last individual after Tim will be Bill Landis. Tim, go ahead.
Gene, I was just wondering if 2001, 9/11, if that gave you any kind of like, a little bit of a precursor of what to kind of expect in a situation like this, even though obviously these are different circumstances with the unknown, but you had an unknown then. But how much did you kind of think back to those times and how things were sort of up in the air?
Great question, Tim. Somebody mentioned that this morning, and very different. And I didn't think about it until someone mentioned it in passing this morning as one of those other moments in time. Very different type of thought process because, I was at Arizona State at that time. So the physical environment was a little bit different. And so here, this is such an unknown. And the tragedy is transferred between people in a different way. So I didn't think about it, but certainly that is some level of a parallel.
Hey, and one other quick thing. I didn't get on there after you had started, but are the football players, for example, are they being told to just stay where they are at this moment? And, basically a lot of them went home for spring break, I'm sure, and with school not re-upping for 2 weeks. But I'm just wondering, what is just sort of the instruction for them from now through the end of the semester? Will they be expected to come back and be in their apartments, I guess, in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, those who are in apartments have obviously the option to come back or stay home because they're learning virtually. So if they're at home, wherever that is, and they don't want to come back to their apartment, they can, or if they want to come back to their apartment, they can. It's just really up to them. But they won't be having organized practices, nor will they have access to the facilities.
Thank you.
And next up will be Bill Landis from The Athletic, and our final questioner after that will be Clay Hall. Bill, go ahead.
Hi, Gene. I was wondering, as part of the Big Ten suspending the team activities, were you guys required to close the athletic facility, or is that a choice you made on your own, and if so, why?
Yeah, it's a choice we made on our own, and some of the schools are doing the same thing, and we felt that kept all of our facilities open and the natural group activity occur, and we felt like we needed to send a message that, like the institution wants us to, is go home, and we're emptying out the doors, and you just draw a parallel there. The institution is asking students in the dorm, over 15,000, to leave the dorms. So what we do is make sure that these facilities clusters and transmit the disease. We have already disease bombed the WAC. We'll continue to do that with the other facilities and basically try and kill bacteria. So the reality is, we just felt we needed to make sure we didn't encourage any voluntary group activities.
And along the lines of what you were asked earlier about sort of how student athletes are taking all of this, I'm wondering if there are things in place with your sports psychology staff to handle what I'm sure are a lot of mental health needs for athletes trying to compartmentalize all this right now, and if there was any consideration given to leaving facilities open, if only to have face-to-face contact with those mental health professionals rather than have to do it remotely.
Yeah, actually, we're really talking about the training facilities. The sports psychology offices are still open. They're still working. We've emphasized with our coaches, for our athletes, that is available. Yes, just like our SATSO staff is available, our tutoring program is still alive and available. We haven't shut down our sports psych operation. They're still in their offices and available to our student athletes if they want to have those sessions.
Thanks.
And final questions coming from Clay Hall from WSYX. Clay?
Gene, you spoke of being on the president's cabinet and having a better handle on the the scope perhaps of coronavirus? Was there no way, if we get to May and things have improved, was there no way to, was it the disease or the calendar that would go against saving the College World Series, the softball championships, lacrosse, etc.?
I'm not sure I get that, Clay. I think it was more. The fact that the experts, when you into the experts, most of them don't believe that it's going to subside by that point in time. So, and the NCAA had more experts available to them in their strategy sessions, I'm sure. So, I think that's more than anything. Keep in mind, those were NCAA decisions, and I'm sure they looked at it relative to other pandemic diseases in the past, and the experts probably advised them that it's best to go all the way. And I'm of that opinion that the start and stop is hard, and so student athletes and parents need certainty. They need certainty, and so the stop and start of things is really difficult. There's a reality to how you handle people's lives, and so I'm assuming that was their discussions, but I don't know that for sure.
But what time frame did you say? We're in for a 3-month proposition here at the very least. Is that your understanding? I'm just curious because you have, as I don't know.
No, that Clay, I'm not. I can't say that. I'm not that expert.
Okay.
I'm not that expert. You got that's something for the medical.
Very good. Thanks.
So anyway, thanks, Jerry, for running this, and I want to thank all of you for being patient, and I want to encourage all of you to take care of yourselves and make sure you implement routine hygiene etiquette and take care of yourself as a board. And thank you for your patience and understanding as we go through this trying issue. So thank you guys